Hey everyone. It's so nice to be here. I'm going to be referring to my note that you can all see right here, so let's dig right into it. My name is Mason Lieberman. Oh, and that was my talk. Thank you so much. Did I step on a wire? Oh, did I just go to sleep?
Yeah. You can just go ahead.
No worries. All right, it is 3:45, so I know how long I can go. My name is Mason. I am a senior composer and audio supervisor at Tencent. And if you happen to know me, some of the games that I've worked on the past have included like League of Legends, Super Smash Bros., Pokemon, Rising the Shield Hero, PUBG Mobile, on and on. Lots of really fun games that have lots of really large teams that are all over the place. And for better or worse, people have decided that whatever way that I happen to do things kind of makes some degree of sense, and they keep asking me to be involved in helping organize and manage teams of audio, which is a bold choice because I have pretty severe inattentive ADHD. For anyone who knows, there are two types of ADHD, or you could argue three: inattentive, hyperactive, or combination, where you have both, where you just win the lottery roll and you get all of the symptoms. I have inattentive, which in my case tends to manifest in a bunch of potential symptoms, including difficulty focusing, problems with concentration, high distractibility, issues with executive function, time blindness. There's a million of these. I wrote them all down so I wouldn't forget because I knew I'd forget. Trouble following directions. My wife sometimes refers to it when I zone out as being AFK. Which yikes. So all of these things can make it very difficult to operate on a team, let alone in something that needs to be as structured and organized as audio, and especially when you're dealing with teams across a million different time zones. For those of you who know, Tencent, we have a lot of offices all around the world, and part of my job is that I'm dealing with people in basically all of them. So time zones can be a real challenge, and that means that I need to be a lot more organized than my brain would naturally allow me to be. Because if I had my way, I would miss every single meeting that I've ever been assigned to. And I would probably miss every single deadline too. So with all of that said, it's manageable. Like you can work through this. This doesn't have to be a deal breaker for you getting into game audio, to you working in a studio, or to you having a fulfilling, meaningful career doing things you love. One of the many things that I've picked up through years of deconstructing the ADHD and therapy and trying to understand what it is that I deal with is that, I'm going to scroll down here so that I don't say this wrong. I want to make sure that I get this right. Sometimes we might be victims of our circumstances, but we don't have to let them define us. Just because you have a particular condition or a neurodiversity or there's a challenge in your life that makes something harder for you than it might be for other people doesn't mean that that has to be the final word on it. You're able to take steps to change your situation, to change how you process information, and to hopefully make things easier for everyone around you so that you're not constantly causing grief, as I certainly used to. So with that said, I've got kind of a list of organizational strategies that have helped me out over the years and that hopefully will help some of you out. You don't need to have ADHD to be able to apply these, but as someone whose brain works in a certain way, these are the things that I've found that I need in order to be able to make a deadline, in order to work well with others, in order to make the thing happen, so to speak. So first things first, communicate your limitations. If you're going to be working with other people and you're operating from a position of fear and you don't want them to know that this is a problem that you have or that this is something that you're susceptible to, if you don't communicate with other people that you have ADHD or any other kind of limitation that may be involved, they can't accommodate for you. You need to share these things, and you need to have an understanding for yourself in order to be able to share that. ADHD is kind of notorious for the fact that it causes us sometimes to do things that might suggest to others that we're disinterested or unmotivated or that we don't care as much about what they're saying to us. And if those people don't understand that sometimes you have symptom flare-ups, you have, real-time processing issues that make it hard for you to follow a conversation, they might rightly conclude that you're just being a prick. But you're not. You're dealing with your condition. And if you share that with them, it's easier for them to try and make their own accommodations and understand. My second general note is that calendars are your friend. And for me, I have kind of a multi-step structuring for calendars. First things first, and when you're in a studio, this is easy. You have joint shared calendars, you have producers who are on your tail making sure you're following them and so on. But when you're the person in charge, something that I've found is really good for me is that I will share some of my calendars with an accountability partner. In this case, usually my wife or my assistant or whoever is working with me on a given thing, to just make sure that I'm not missing anything obvious, that things are getting covered. I always set an alarm for every single event, and in my case, I've found that building the habit of, I know that my calendar will always have an alarm 10 minutes before an event. So when that goes off, I have 10 minutes to get to wherever I need to go. And then additionally, every single day, the night before a given work day, before I go to bed, I built a habit where I always go through my calendar for the next day, and I set manual alarms on my phone for every single event that I'm going to do. Every single talk, every time that I need to eat food, I set times for how long it's going to take me to cook, because otherwise, sometimes with time blindness, I'm going to forget these things. And I've found that that can be really helpful for building this pattern, for building this consistency, to make it more likely that I'll actually show up and do the thing I need to do. When you're dealing with longer form projects, when you're delivering an audio pipeline, you have to create all the things, I've generally found that a great technique is working backwards. You start from the drop dead date that the project needs to ship on, and then you work out every single step that you're going to need to take in order to reach that final delivery point, and you map out the length of time that it's going to take. And then you add like 30% for delays, for time for communication, for everything that goes into a project, to make sure that you're going to actually do this, and then you build out your schedule starting from the end, working backwards, so that you know roughly how long you have for every task and how you should structure it. And so because I am very, very thorough about doing this, my calendar right now has like events for games that are coming out 4 years from now in my calendar right now. That is what I found I need to do if I want to actually be reasonably consistent and actually make everything work. And the end result is that if you do this correctly, you could be working on a lot of projects simultaneously and never feel like you're getting overwhelmed or running out of time because you're doing a good job of building space for each thing. Right now, I'm managing Audio Pipeline on like 6 live service titles, and it doesn't actually feel terribly crunchy. Like, it's not actually that hard to do if you're actually building out the time to do everything properly. My next comment, and this is something that I've sometimes had arguments with other people over, is that I believe that everyone should always be taking notes. I think that no matter who you are, no matter how high up you are in a hierarchy, you should be responsible for taking your own notes, even if you have an assistant who could be doing it, or even if there's someone whose job is to take the meeting minutes or whatever have you. Because especially as someone who sometimes has difficulty processing information, I find that notes that work for me may not be the same as the notes that work for you or that work for my team. And so one of the things that's always an important part of my process for any given meeting is that I will take my bullet line item notes of what I understand. I can read this and know what it is that I want to say, and then I will make sure that we have someone, maybe one of our junior employees, who will be taking more thorough, more rigorous notes, stenographer style. And ultimately, I will go through and I will take a little bit of time and I will manually conform whatever it is that they've got with whatever it is that I wanted to pick on in case there are things that I'm noting or I'm documenting that maybe they didn't follow or understand, because that helps with generally building team knowledge. It helps a little bit with providing an opportunity for mentoring, and it gives you a better piece of, central material. Good notes are essential. Finally, to go through the last couple, One, work in a way that fits you. And I'm not really great in an office. Super, super overstimulating for me. It's very distracting. It can be really hard for me to focus. So for me, remote work has been an absolute godsend because it's a lot easier for me to just turn off all my phone notifications and say, okay, the next 3 hours, I'm going to be working on the following 2 cues, and then I have this 30-minute meeting, and then I've got this time for lunch, and then I'm going to take this little break. Way easier workflow for me than having to deal with people coming over to my desk or coming over to my office and asking questions. And it's easier for me to say, hey, I'm going to be available at the following times consistently every single day. If you message me before that point, I'm going to respond at that point. If you message me after that, there might be a day of lag unless it's an emergency. If this isn't an emergency, then please allow me to respond at a later point. And communicating that boundary can really help a lot because most of the time, we're not rocket scientists. We're not building, we're not saving lives. We're making wiggly air. We're making sine waves and having a good time. I always try to limit my distractions, and I kind of explain that with excessive notifications and doing block out times for when you're doing your work. I also encourage to prepare your workstation. And for me, I know that if I get up from my desk because I need a water, that is like a red alert that, oh no, I'm going to get up and I'm going to walk into my living room and, I'm going to notice that the pillows are a little bit messed up. I should fix the pillows. Oh, well, now that I see that, there's a lot of dust on the floor. I need to vacuum. Oh, well, now that I do that, I'm a little hungry. Maybe I should have an extra snack. Okay, now I'm toasting my bread, and before I know it, I've missed my meeting. By being very careful and setting up your time whenever you're going through, sounds good, you're able to try and avoid all this stuff. So I get my water before I start work. I grab a little snack and I bring it to my desk. I bring a jacket in case it's going to get cold. I pre-plan all of this stuff. Final 2 notes, because I'm going to keep it really tight. Physical activity and sunshine help. They are good. I hate the sun. It's very hot and it makes me unhappy. But I'm more unhappy if I don't see the sun. Please see the sun. And finally, micro goals are a good way of balancing your dopamine hits and maintaining motivation. So don't structure your workday around this big thing you need to do, because if you don't do that, you're going to feel like shit and it's going to demotivate you and it's going to make it harder to hit your next deadline. By doing everything in steps and individual targets, you're able to measure how much progress you've made. And you're always making some progress, so you can always feel motivated about what you're doing. Questions? Yes? Any advice on figuring out how long things are going to take you? So something that I have actually spent a lot of time doing, time yourself. Literally go through a normal, if you have to take a shower or something, set a timer and just see, measure how long it takes you to take a normal ass shower. Measure how long it's going to take you to deliver a certain type of content. And obviously everything's variable when you're dealing with creative work, there's a variance. But you're going to find that more often than not, you're actually pretty consistent with the work that you do. So literally time yourself. And did we get more sensitive on the mic a little? That's all right. Just time yourself, and this is where having an accountability partner can be really valuable. If you talk to other people and say, hey, do I tend to show up late to events? They'll tell you if you do. They'll be very direct with you. And maybe that's a sign of clearly I'm not understanding how long it takes me to do this, to get ready for this, or I'm having issues with this type of deadline. Maybe I'm not understanding the number of steps that go into it. Let me reassess. Any other questions?
Yeah, you talked about starting at the drop dead date and working in reverse to build a schedule over the course of years.
Yeah.
How do you go about dividing years into, steps that don't seem arbitrary for you?
Sure thing. So I will say that obviously there's flexibility in everything. The reality is when you're on a 6-year development cycle, you don't know exactly what you're going to do on like Tuesday the 3rd of March in 2029. But generally speaking, you know how long certain steps are, you know when you need to do something. I know that realistically, if I'm going to have 4 hours of music and 3 hours of it are going to be recorded with orchestra, and I can record X number of minutes per hour that I'm a scoring stage, and it takes this amount of time for me to book the stage out, and I have to book this far in advance, and all the other various things that kind of come together in each individual part of the audio discipline, you have a good understanding of when you need to get a task done, give or take. So, I find that working backwards like that, it gives me a framework to work in. And then, obviously, as long as you're building time, yeah, if you need to shift a deadline because actually, we're going to be a little late on getting this, or, oh, the art team's behind on this area, yeah, whatever, it's not a big deal. But you have a structure to get you to that, like, point F or point G along that pipeline before you make those adjustments.
We have a question from Chad. I think this is the last question.
Sure thing.
How do you get work done when you're in a low spot or feeling down?
So I'm going. Sure thing. So Chad asks, how do you get work done when you're in a low spot or you're feeling down? So I'm gonna go ahead and take I don't think it's that spicy of a take in this room. Don't. Like, honestly, I think that most of the time, part of what forces you into burnout and forces you into like a really unhealthy mind space where you can't get work done is that you kept pushing past your limits and your body was telling you for whatever reason, hey, now's maybe not the best time to do this. And a large part of, I think, ethical production, ethical development, is understanding that this job is not more important than your life. It's not more important than your team. It's not more important than the people who you spend your time with. So obviously, there are times you're going to have to work where you're not necessarily feeling it. I focus very granularly on the steps in those moments to try and feel more motivated, because if I can just do this next step, I'll be a little closer. If I can just do this one thing, just do this next thing, just open these files and put them in the system, start listening to things. Once I'm doing it, I'm in the flow. But don't always feel like you need to force yourself to work. Work is not the end-all and be-all of existence.